like that about this field, because people do come from all different walks of life. It makes it really nicely musically diverse.
In the same way as like I want any of my community music projects to like feel like a community. It's like a bunch of pals getting together to make music, and some people know each other really well and some people don't know each other that well, but you're all there at the same gig and you all just like chip in.
I identify as disabled. I've always had kind of specific access needs that are often perceived as complicated by other people. So I'm kind of used to thinking out of the box, and that kind of feeds into my practice.
We start with hello, then we do a warm-up, then we'll have something creative that they're putting some input into, then we'll have something we know really well, then we'll maybe expand on something else that we know, and then we'll do something familiar, then some relaxing, then say goodbye. So I co-founded Hear My Music back in 2010. We just graduated from a community music master's. And we thought we wanted to do something that we couldn't quite see was happening. Started delivering projects in schools and then community centres. We started it as a small company. So I've been running it pretty much myself until a couple of years ago when we took on some part-time staff.
So how did I become involved in community music? So I basically always knew that I wanted to work with people, I guess. And music was basically one of the only things I was kind of good at school, and kind of felt like I wanted to continue. So I discovered that there was a community music undergrad at the University of Aberdeen, and basically set my heart on that.
I went to university to study classical music and hated every minute of it, because it was all about like being on your own in a practice room, learning your scales and not making music with other people, and it was pants. I hated it, and like I knew that I really wanted to make music with other people, and I thought that I wanted to make it in an orchestra, but actually after like 2 years in university, I was like, that's pure not what I want to do. But then at that point, when I was at the point of really hating university, my university started a new course, and it was this community music course, which just sounded like absolutely perfect. It was like my absolute dream course.
I wanted to do music therapy, and the reason that I'd chosen the community music course was basically to get the experience of the placements, because I knew that would be much harder to get out of that degree. And then I basically discovered that there was all this really cool stuff going on in the community world that was using music as like a tool to community development. But I realised like how many different ways people were doing what they were calling the same thing.
The project that you're following just now, the partnership with the GLAD Foundation, started back in 2013, and it was one parent actually who got in touch with the GLAD Cafe and said there's no provision for my son to do music out of school, and I would like there to be. A slightly informal conversation that then started up into what was then called GLAD Tuesdays. It was just a 1 hour after school group session, and it's grown into 3 full after school afternoons now. The first step is getting them through the door, and then, figuring out what's going to make them tick and how we're going to work with them. And then we can sort of build up working in groups. So their spaces come up because of that, because we'll sort of be working with someone individually and then they'll be in a small group.
When I started working in community music, because I was just out of university and I was very like, I'd learned how to be a community musician and I'd learned all the rules, and I was like, right, I need to dress smart for work, I'm going to go and do my community music job. But over the years, and especially now, it's really starting to just become me, just like part punk musician, part community musician.
every time I try and explain my job to anyone, they're like, oh, is it music therapy? And I'm like, well, no, because that's what I've tried to get away from. Community music has a wider variety of intentions within it. It could be to help people to communicate. It could be to mend a rift within a community. It could be to make people feel better.
No, we've not had any in-person sessions, so don't know if you remember the timeline, but there was basically 1 week before the schools closed when everything was kind of cancelled, but the schools were still on. So we didn't have sessions that week, but then the school closure announcement came and we were set up to go online the following week.
We have lost a few folk who just won't, music doesn't happen on the computer, so I'm not doing it. Yeah. But I think especially for the group that you've seen, they're all really like, yeah, we're doing music. Just it has to happen, so it has to happen.
In a lot of ways, like being in my own space makes me a lot more willing to take more risks within my practice in what I do, and that because I feel comfortable and I know where things are. If I'm in a room in a random building, I don't usually know where anything is, and it can be quite overwhelming for me. And I think I've definitely seen that within the participants as well. Like a lot of the participants have just really thrived being in their own space.
It was a really lovely discovery. Some of our particularly individual sessions, we noticed anxiety levels were a lot reduced, which was lovely. It took the participants sort of a different amount of time for each individual to learn how to do it. We discovered that kids are so much better at technology than us. I don't think that was a surprise.
It's very important to me that technology is accessible to everyone.
Because of the work that Emily and I have done in the past, and I guess the sort of being a musician comes into this. If you go and you tour and you drive to Bath and you're not really sure where you're staying and you play a gig and then afterwards you're sleeping on a grotty floor, you kind of just have to get on with it. And on the work side of that as well, Emily and I have both worked in situations where kids will shout at you or throw chairs at you, or it can be a little bit violent or a bit scary, or somebody will say something that's just so left field. But you just have to get on with it. You just have to do it. It's the nature of the job. You just go, oh, this is fine, we'll get on with it. And it always is fine. And it's actually one of my favourite parts of the job. It's just who knows what might happen.
I know that there's still been loads of problems with people not being able to work from home when they maybe should have. But on a very, very large scale, people have been able and enabled to work from home. And yeah, it's been quite a lot of learning for a lot of businesses. There's had to be a lot of compromises. But this is something that disabled people have been asking for the whole of history, and it was impossible apparently, and then it wasn't impossible because not disabled people wanted it.
The nice thing about the pandemic is that it's forced everybody onto a level playing field. We're all stuck online. A sort of general pandemic thing that I've noticed is that we're all really good now, or not really good, but better than we were at asking each other what we need.
Yeah, we're probably doing a lot more movement and action songs than I would have done necessarily with everybody before, and just because they work online. Instead of a big sort of drumming warm-up where you're physically going, doing all this, we'll do something that's visible in this part of the screen.
Posting about work that we're doing just becomes, oh, here's a group of people making music. The fact that they all have autism becomes secondary because we're just posting stuff, and people are also, everybody's doing stuff on Zoom.
But there are certainly a lot of things that we've discovered that have been a real advantage, which we will take away and possibly have some sort of hybrid model. And it's probably less about travel actually, and more about kind of anxiety levels and comfort levels in accessing the sessions. But we'll never do this exclusively unless we have to, but we'll take away all the good bits of it.
I've had to learn to be quite a lot more patient with myself because I think I probably did expect to just be able to like be the same practitioner online as offline. At some points it's felt like a completely different job.
I'd say turn taking is easier on Zoom because you can spend that time waiting for somebody, and if you're making a sound but you're on mute, you're not going to interrupt them, you know.
The thing that's interesting about it is that a lot of folk with autism really can't handle lots of live, like a full band playing live would be too much. So the Zoom thing has worked really well for folk who get a bit overwhelmed in physical presence, but they know on Zoom that if they get overwhelmed they can just turn us off and then we're gone. And actually I think because of that, a lot of folk have really taken to the online working more than they maybe prefer that.
We desperately miss playing together. You can't make that up, but there's so much you can do.